This month on Hingham Happenings, learn how to stay safe against one wild animal, find out how one Hingham pub celebrates St. Patrick's Day, and Hingham resident Jim Conroy visits HCAM's studio to discuss his new book about Abraham Lincoln. All this coming up on Hingham Happenings. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hingham Happenings. I'm your host, Ryan Allen. Well, we live in a world with the wild, and sometimes the wild can attack. Recently, one Hingham resident was attacked by one of these wild animals, so we wanted to learn of ways to prevent such attacks in the future. It was no ordinary emergency for Hingham Animal Control Officer Leslie Badger. And a 73-year-old woman was in need of help.
She was sleeping in bed, and when she woke up, she felt something kind of close to her face. And she thought it was a cat, and what turned out to be actually a raccoon. But when she tried to remove the raccoon from her face area, it latched on and started attacking her, causing her to screw her up in her chin and both her tongue. So she was able to get it off her before we got there, and she fought it out of her bedroom.
Badger ultimately triumphed over the raccoon.
He was definitely aggressive and definitely bit for a fight. But we were able pretty quickly to get him under control. We were able to put out an animal with a net and a rabies pill. We put it down and we took it to be tested.
Raccoons will attack every now and then, but residents can take preventative measures to reduce their chances of facing dangerous encounters with raccoons. Dr. Greg Mertz and Dr. Rob Adamski of the New England Wildlife Center urge people to be proactive when it comes to safety.
If you have a raccoon or a group of raccoons that are coming back to your house night after night after night, that's an indication that you either have shelter for them that's available or that you have food or a combination of both.
If you're going to utilize bird feeders, okay, go ahead and try to make them as scavenger proof as possible, okay? So hang them from trees. Go ahead and put obstacles or baffles up so that like squirrels and other animals like raccoons can't get access to the bird feeders. And then go ahead and clean up all the scattered seed like at least every couple days or at least weekly, so you're not providing a ready food source for the raccoons.
Food is food from these guys' point of view. Although they're not big grain eaters, they will eat corn, which is in the bird feed. They're also big, if you have fruit trees in your yard, they're going to eat those kinds of things.
If you feed dogs or cats outside, we usually discourage that. If you leave, food bowls with dog or cat food outside, that's basically just a buffet for the raccoon, okay? So feed your animals either inside or in a restricted area like the garage or something like that the raccoons normally wouldn't have access to.
Wintertime is tough on them. It's a time when there's not a lot of food. They are omnivores, so they will eat almost anything. Anything. One of the reasons they end up hanging around garbage cans is because everything we're eating is just perfectly fine for what a raccoon is eating. So they eat both meat. They're also scavengers that they will find dead things and eat them, and they're also herbivores. So that's a true carnivore. The teeth arrangement, though, is set up as if they were a carnivore.
So if you minimize or eliminate their sources of potential food around your house, then the raccoons are not going to be attracted to your backyard and to your property.
That food is not being sort of thrown out to other animals. You don't want to feed the birds and not expect the raccoons to show up.
So help prevent the possibility of raccoon attacks by simply taking care of your trash.
So go ahead and secure your trash can lids. Make sure you have trash can lids that are either lockable or screw on or have some kind of security device on them.
And there is also a common object that you can find outdoors.
If for some reason you are confronted with a raccoon, back off. My best weapon is using a stick. I just carry a stick, and I'm not trying to beat the animal, believe me, but I just try to keep that animal at bay. I give them something. It's almost, your stick almost acts like a tail. If you ever watch a cat, when a cat is out looking for whatever it's trying to catch, you'll see that the tail moves and twitches. And what that's doing is it's taking the line of vision of the prey to the tail, not to the front end of the cat. And it's same going on here. You use a stick as a way of diverting attention. You're using a stick as a way of diverting attention away from you to something that is capturing their attention. And if something's going to get bitten, it's the end of the stick. And so that's how, even in our hospital, that's how we deal with an awful lot of animals we're worried about, is we put a stick out for them, and their attention is drawn to that as opposed to drawn to us. So yeah, banging of pots, taking pots and banging them around in is a great way to keep coyotes away. Also a great way to keep raccoons, foxes, and things like that, because they're scared by those kinds of sounds, and they back away. They like holes. They like to be under things. They like to be up in attics. They like to be in holes in trees. So anything that looks like a little protected place that they can go in, hide, and sleep, especially this time of year again, then you need to figure out how to cover that over.
If you have holes or access points underneath porches or underneath your actual building, underneath your house, or underneath some sheds, go ahead and secure them off, or fill them in if possible if they're holes, or block them off with some kind of barrier devices.
Things like hardware cloth and chicken wire, and they make all sorts of preventative things, but they're all carpentry problems.
Dr. Mertz does not view animals as enemies.
Healthy raccoons are not going to attack you unless they are cornered. If they get cornered, then of course they're going to defend themselves. But they're pretty reticent. They're pretty shy of people. They'll take a glance at you, as they go across the yard or across the road. They'll take a look to see who you are and all that. They don't want to interact with you. If you find a raccoon that wants to interact with you, boy, first thing I think you need to do is stand your distance. Keep your distance away from them. And if that means going indoors, it means going indoors. If it means taking your dog indoors, it means taking your dog indoors or your cat indoors. And I would call animal control. I would call one of the animal controls. Officers like Leslie Badger here in Hingham is a great resource for this kind of information.
You want to make sure that you've got those places completely secure and that they're not able to get in there and make that den. And once they have that done, they're going to be more than happy to stay there and be
As a result, you want to keep your distance from raccoons, but you want to enjoy them. They are a Native American. They were here long before the people were, and so they're real Native American patriots of sort, and they're really fascinating to watch.
The wild needs to be understood.
The reason they're quiet is because there's not a lot of food for them at this time of year. And so they do not hibernate. They're not a true hibernator, but they will get quiet and settle down and go for days sleeping, especially when the weather is cloudy and a little punky. They're really not bothered by the cold, though. They have a really incredible fur coat, and that fur coat really protects them. The hardest part probably for a raccoon is that the feet, and the front feet and the rear feet, have a very soft pad, and it's also a pad that is so invested, the front feet especially, is so invested with nerves that they have much better dexterity. They have much better sense of feel on their front toes than we do. As a matter of fact, it turns out that raccoons have more nerves going to their front feet than they do to their eyeballs. And they have a vision capacity that is similar to ours. The difference between a raccoon's vision and our vision is a couple things. One is that they see in black and white. They have very little capacity to see color. We know that because if you look at the back of the eyeball, the retina, the part of the eye that actually sees the image and processes the image, in a raccoon is almost composed of almost all rods. And human beings have rods and cones. And cones are what see color, and cones take up a lot of space. So we need to be out during the daytime when light is bright so that we can see what the colors are. If you ever notice, you go into a dark room, you don't see color very well. And that's because those cones are not working without a lot of light around them. The raccoon sees no color, but all the back of the eye is made of rods, and those rods are exquisitely sensitive to even the dimmest light. And that dim light allows them to see an incredible detail and resolution. And so he's a great seer for nighttime. The other thing is his eyes are in the front of a triangle. We have sort of front-faced, and we see with our eyes side by side. He has his eyes side by side too. In addition to that, his eyes, because his face is so triangular, allow him to see to the right and see to the left at the same time. So he's got a much bigger range of vision than we do. He doesn't have to cock his head left and right or up and down to see where things are. He can just look out and catch it all at the same time.
And these creatures need the help of humans.
Over my right shoulder, there's a raccoon that came into the center, came into the wildlife hospital. He's been here for about 3 weeks.
And after we did some initial diagnostic testing, it was found to have both anemia, which is a sign it doesn't have enough red blood cells, okay, which can cause a lot of health problems. And then we also found through the blood work we did that it actually had signs of some kind of inflammation going on somewhere in its body. And a lot of times that inflammation could either be due to like a body-wide infection or some kind of trauma. So subsequently, we've treated this raccoon with antibiotics to help potentially deal with the infection. And we've also administered anti-inflammatories, or like prescription strength versions of like what you guys would use, like Motrin, for instance, to help deal with the source of inflammation in the animal. We've also tested it for various infectious diseases that are relatively common in raccoons.
They are a vector of rabies. They are a vector of distemper. We're discovering here at New England Wildlife Center that they're also a vector of parvovirus and a couple of other things. There's one other parasite that we worry about with raccoons, and it's called Balis ascaris procyanus, which means raccoon roundworm. And that's a potential problem. Now, are these guys at fault? No, they're not at fault. It's just the diseases that they suffer turn out to be some of the same diseases that we suffer.
It has tested negative for both distemper and parvovirus in raccoons. So it's currently undergoing treatment. It has about another 5-7 days left. Then we'll go ahead and retest it. We'll redo its blood work, give it a physical exam, and if everything looks good, hopefully it's going to be released back out into the area that it was found in.
Respecting the behavior of these animals will make everyone safer.
I have been checking in with the victim and seeing how she is feeling. Her injuries are basically to her face and her lip and chin area, along with her thumbs. She is doing well. She is a trooper, and she will have a little bit of a road to go down, but she will definitely want to be okay.
They're really fascinating to watch. They've got great personalities. They're intelligent, and they've got a lot of dexterity.
St. Patrick's Day is on March 17th, and what better way to celebrate than eating a boiled dinner and listening to great Irish tunes with friends. Behind me is one comfortable pub in downtown Hingham where you can accomplish all this and more. On St. Patrick's Day, you may not find a leprechaun or a pot of gold, but you will find more than a wee bit of Irish food and beverages at one pub in Hingham. It's called the Snug, and the Snug has a tight tug on what St. Patrick's Day is all about. Ed Brown owns the Snug with his wife Ellen, and he shared his love for the holiday. Irish food is a hot commodity on St. Patrick's Day, and the Snug has plenty of it. So many choices, but there has to be a favorite. And the high-quality food attracts those looking for that bite that hits the spot. And one drink has remained perfect over the years. The Snug also receives compliments on the Irish music played at the pub. There's many features that makes the Snug so inviting. St. Paddy's Day is in the air. This past month we celebrated President's Day, and one of the country's most famous presidents has roots right here in Hingham. Abraham Lincoln led the United States through the Civil War, the bloodiest war in our nation's history. But few know the secret meeting that Lincoln had during the height of the Civil War in which he attempted to achieve peace with the Confederate States. Hingham resident and author Jim Conroy explains in his new book, Our One Common Country, the political risks that Lincoln took to try to end the Civil War.
Well, to set the stage for the book, the Hampton Roads Peace Conference of 1865 took place in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in the shadow of Fort Monroe, which was a massive stone Union fort that's still there, actually, that guarded the approach to the James River. It had never left Union hands, even though it was in Virginia. The setting militarily was brutal for the South, I suppose is the simplest way to put it. The Confederacy was really on the ropes, and what Lincoln was trying to achieve at that point, more than anything, was to end the war as quickly as he could, not only to save lives and property, but to accelerate the pace of the national healing that was really his first priority at that point.
Lincoln's popularity had been up and down throughout the war. By the time of the Hampton Roads Peace Conference in February of 1865, his approval rating had greatly improved, but he still had to attend the peace conference in secret to avoid political backlash.
As recently as August, Lincoln had been completely on the ropes politically and was not expected to be reelected because of the stalemate in the military situation at that point. And then in September, General Sherman took Atlanta, and Farragut won the Battle of Mobile Bay, and there were Union victories in the Shenandoah Valley, and the tide of the war just changed to the point where Lincoln was handily reelected. But he was still really beset by critics on both left and right. He was a Republican, and the radical wing of his party was so fiercely anti-Southern and so vehement about it that they were just doggedly opposed to any kind of negotiation with the South. Their goal was to just crush the South militarily and then conquer it, as they said, as England governs India, basically as a conquered province. On the other side, the Democrats were more or less sympathetic to the South, always had been. The Democratic Party was rooted in the South at the time, and they were pressuring Lincoln to negotiate. So he was getting pressured on the left, if you will, to negotiate, and on the right, not to.
Even with political pressure on both sides, Lincoln had a bigger challenge heading to the peace conference.
The real struggle for him was that he didn't have anybody to negotiate with. Lincoln firmly rejected any legitimization of the Confederate government. As he positioned it, they were rebels. They were not a government at all. They were just insurrectionists. He referred to Jefferson Davis as the insurgent leader rather than as the president of the Confederacy. So he was really unwilling to have a formal negotiation because that would be essentially to recognize that government. So the difficulty became, how do we get this done and how are we going to talk to someone?
The meeting was supposed to be held in secret, but it was a hard secret to keep.
The secrecy end of it was that Lincoln told no one in his cabinet or his own staff that he was going down to join Seward to participate in this negotiation. No one knew it but Seward. Once he was on his way and arrived there with the regalia and the rest that comes with the president, it became clear that he was there. But until that point, it was not known.
Once the secret was out and President Lincoln arrived, talks got underway.
The peace conference took place on the presidential steamboat called the River Queen. I like to think of it as the Air Force One of its day. It was the official presidential vessel, very plush, brand new, beautifully furnished and fitted out. Lincoln met in its saloon, as it was called, more or less a floating drawing room. So Seward and Lincoln met in that room with three Southern peace delegates. One was the vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Hamilton Stevens, very eccentric character who I think is maybe one of the most interesting people in the book, and had been a close friend of Lincoln's in Congress back in 1848. The second Confederate delegate was a former justice of the United States Supreme Court by the name of John Campbell, another very interesting fellow, might have been the smartest man in America, as I say in the book. Then the third Southern delegate was a senator from Virginia by the name of Robert Hunter, another interesting guy who had been the youngest Speaker of the House in American history at the age of 32. Very prominent senator after that, had also worked with Seward to try to prevent the war. So you had these three pro-Union, pre-war Southerners meeting with Lincoln and Seward on the River Queen. Seward had been a close friend of Hunter's. Lincoln had been a close friend of Stevens. So it was really a reunion of old friends at the beginning. And they spent the next 15 or 20 minutes just chatting about old times and reminiscing. And then, as I say in the book, the laughter came to an end. when they got down to business.
The focus of the meeting was of course about trying to find terms that would end the war. President Lincoln made his feelings known, loud and clear.
Lincoln laid down the law right at the beginning that he would not consider any terms that didn't include reunion, number one. And number two, what he described as no backward steps by the executive, by the president, on the slavery issue. And if you parse that out, what he was saying was, I've issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which essentially had only freed slaves that were going to be under the Union Army's control, because it had no practical effect otherwise. So the vast majority of the slaves had not been freed by the Emancipation Proclamation. He was never going to retract that or withdraw any of his positions. But if Congress or the courts were to mitigate the effects of emancipation on the Southern whites, he was not going to oppose that. So he was basically telling them, we're not your moral superiors. We're not here dictating to you as moral superiors. And if the North sold the slaves to the South, it would be proper for the North to pay for the slaves when they're liberated. So he held that carrot out to the Southerners. Nobody had authority to bind to this, however, because Lincoln couldn't speak for the Congress. The Southerners couldn't bind their Congress or their president. So it ended inconclusively as to what would happen next, but it was a serious effort that had consequences after it ended.
And residents will have a chance to meet Conroy at the Barnes & Noble at the Derby Street Shops later this April.
Barnes & Noble at Derby Shops is hosting an authors event on April 12th. I think it's 3 p.m. And I will be there as well as some other local authors. And we'll be speaking briefly about our books, mine and the others, and signing books. And it's an opportunity for people to meet local writers and engage in a discussion and hopefully have an enjoyable afternoon.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Hingham Happenings. Be sure to tune in next month. And for everyone at HCAM, I'm Ryan Allen saying take care, go out there, and make things happen.